There was a boy who grew up in a house that was never truly safe. Not unsafe in the way you might imagine. There were no storms, no wars, no disasters that tore the walls apart. The danger was quieter, almost invisible. It came in the form of words left unsaid, hugs never given, questions never answered. He sat at the dinner table every night with the same ache in his chest, wondering why it felt like he was invisible, why no one noticed how hard he was trying to smile. And though no one ever told him outright that he was unworthy, every silence, every dismissal, every glance that passed right through him as if he wasn't there, carried the message more clearly than words ever could. That boy grew into a man, and though his body aged, his career grew, his life seemed on track, inside something still felt unfinished. A child still tugged at his sleeve, whispering questions he had buried long ago. Questions like, am I good enough? Why didn't they stay? Why didn't they see me? And the truth is, he never stopped asking them. They just changed shape. They became the doubts he carried into relationships, the unease he felt in moments of silence, the constant need to prove himself in ways that never truly satisfied. This is the lifelong punishment of childhood trauma. And I need you to hear me on this. Trauma doesn't only come from the big dramatic events we usually imagine. It's not only the obvious stories of abandonment or loss. Sometimes, trauma grows in the quiet spaces, in the emotional absences, the small humiliations, the moments when love was withheld or safety was conditional. And because those wounds are so subtle, we often dismiss them. We tell ourselves other people had it worse, or I should just be over it by now. But the brain doesn't work that way. The nervous system doesn't measure trauma in comparisons. It only knows what it felt. And what it felt in those early years, that becomes the script we carry for life. Here's what's fascinating and heartbreaking about this. Neuroscience shows us that the human brain is wired for survival first, connection second, and self-actualization last. As children, we depend entirely on our caregivers, not just for food and shelter, but for the shaping of our nervous system. Every glance, every touch, every word calibrates us. When we are nurtured, our brain learns safety. When we are neglected, our brain learns vigilance. And when that vigilance becomes the baseline, we grow into adults who are constantly scanning, constantly anticipating danger, even when none is there. That's the punishment, to live in the present, but never feel truly present. But here's the question I couldn't shake while studying this. Why does it last so long? Why do so many people carry these invisible burdens into their 40s, 50s, even their 70s? Shouldn't time heal? Shouldn't success or love or new relationships fill the void? That's where the hidden truth lies. Childhood trauma doesn't just live in memory, it lives in the body. It becomes a language of sensations, a set of reflexes, a background hum of unease. The psychologist Bessel van der Kolk famously said, "The body keeps the score," and that means your nervous system doesn't care if decades have passed. If something felt unsafe at 5 years old, your body still organizes itself around that at 35, unless it has been consciously healed. Think about it like this. Imagine your mind as a record player. Childhood lays down the grooves. If those grooves are carved with rejection, fear, or neglect, the record will keep playing the same melody over and over until something interrupts the pattern. You might change partners, careers, cities. You might chase achievement, success, or validation. But the record doesn't stop until you learn how to lift the needle. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Studies show that adults who experienced emotional neglect as children often overperform. They become high achievers, perfectionists, caretakers. On the surface, it looks like resilience, and in some ways, it is. But underneath, it's often driven by the same wound. The desperate need to earn the love that should have been given freely. And because no amount of external success can fill that internal absence, they often find themselves exhausted, disillusioned, and quietly asking the same question the child once asked. When will I finally feel enough? But let me open a loop here because there's something most people never realize. What if I told you that the greatest punishment of childhood trauma isn't the pain itself? What if it's something much more subtle, and in some ways more haunting? Something most people don't see until it's too late. I'll come back to that. For now, let's go deeper. Trauma changes more than just emotions. It changes the brain itself. Research using MRI scans shows that childhood trauma can literally reshape brain structures. The amygdala, the alarm system of the brain, can become hyperactive, leading to constant anxiety. The hippocampus, which helps process memory and context, can shrink, making it harder to distinguish between past and present threats. And the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking and impulse control, can become less active. This means that even as adults, we may react to a minor conflict with the intensity of a child facing a real danger. This isn't weakness, it isn't brokenness, it's adaptation. The brain rewired itself to keep you alive in an environment where safety was not guaranteed. But here's the paradox. The very wiring that once protected you can later become the prison that holds you back. And isn't that the cruelest punishment? To survive the past, only to be haunted by its fingerprints in the present. Now, here's the twist I promised earlier. The real punishment of childhood trauma isn't the pain you remember. It's the parts of yourself you never got to develop because you were too busy surviving. It's the playfulness that never had space to bloom, the creativity that got stifled, the trust that never felt safe to grow. Trauma doesn't just steal moments, it steals possibilities. And that absence lingers, often unnoticed, shaping choices in love, in work, in identity. But don't think this is hopeless, because there's another layer, one that offers both challenge and possibility. Just as trauma reshapes the brain, healing can too. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, means that new patterns can be built, even decades later. The grooves on the record player can be shifted. But here's the hard truth. Healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means learning to carry it differently. It means transforming what once was a chain into something closer to wisdom. Still, there's something else I need to leave with you before we move into the second half of this story. A question that might keep tugging at your mind tonight when the video ends. If trauma is the lifelong punishment, what then is the path toward freedom? And more importantly, what if the very wounds you carry could hold the seeds of your greatest strengths? And so we arrive at the question that lingers like an echo. If the punishment of childhood trauma follows us across decades, what is the way forward? Can you ever really escape the shadow of a childhood that never gave you the safety, the love, the stability you deserved? Or are we doomed to spend the rest of our lives repeating patterns we never consciously chose? The truth is, you cannot change what happened to you. You cannot rewrite the story of those early years, but you can change the relationship you have with it. You can stop being the prisoner of your own past and start becoming its interpreter. Because here is the paradox most people miss. What once broke, you can also become the very thing that teaches you how to live more deeply, how to see more clearly, how to love more fiercely. Let's go back to that boy I told you about earlier, the one who grew up invisible, unseen. As a man, he found himself in endless cycles of trying to prove his worth. He climbed ladders, he sought recognition, he won approval from people who didn't even matter to him. But no matter how much he achieved, the emptiness never left. Until one day, something shifted. It didn't happen through a dramatic epiphany. It wasn't a lightning strike moment. It was a slow realization, one that came in the quiet hours. He realized that what he was chasing wasn't success, it was permission. Permission to finally believe he was worthy, and he realized that no one else could give him that. That's the first step to freedom, recognizing that the love you were denied cannot be replaced by achievement, attention, or even relationships. It has to be rebuilt from within. And I know that sounds cliche, almost like one of those phrases you'd see on a motivational poster. But it's not. It's biology. When you consciously choose new patterns, when you practice self-compassion, when you allow yourself to rest without guilt, when you set boundaries you once thought were impossible, you are literally rewiring your brain. You are showing your nervous system a new reality, that safety and worth are no longer conditional. But let's be honest, this isn't easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest things a person can do, because every cell in your body is trained to resist it. Think of it like walking out of a prison cell you've lived in for 30 years. Even when the door is unlocked, even when freedom is right there, part of you hesitates. Why? Because the familiar, even when painful, feels safer than the unknown. That's why healing often feels uncomfortable. It's not because you're doing it wrong, it's because you're stepping into a territory your nervous system has never known. And here's the strange, almost cruel irony of childhood trauma. The punishment is lifelong, yes, but so is the opportunity to rewrite its meaning. Because trauma may shape you, but it does not define the sum of who you are. It's a chapter in your story, but not the ending. Now, let me open another loop here because this is something very few people talk about. What if I told you that inside your trauma lies something the world desperately needs? That the very qualities you develop to survive, hyper-awareness, empathy, resilience, creativity, can also become gifts when they are no longer fueled by fear? Think about it. The child who learned to scan every room for danger often grows into the adult who can read people with astonishing sensitivity. The child who became a perfectionist to avoid criticism often grows into the adult who can achieve mastery in their craft. The child who had to imagine better worlds to escape pain often becomes the adult who creates beauty, art, or innovation. The punishment of trauma is real, but so is the possibility hidden within it. But let's not sugarcoat this. These gifts only emerge when the wounds are faced, not ignored. Left unhealed, sensitivity turns into anxiety. Empathy turns into people-pleasing. Resilience turns into burnout. Healing is not about erasing your story. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that were twisted by survival and giving them new expression. So how do you begin? Let me make it concrete. First, acknowledge the child, not metaphorically, literally. Take time to remember what they felt, what they needed, what they never received. It may sound strange, but neuroscience shows that visualization and inner dialogue can actually repattern neural connections. When you speak compassion to the younger version of yourself, your brain processes it as if it were happening in real time. You are, in a sense, giving yourself the parenting you missed. Second, regulate the body. Trauma lives in the nervous system, not just the mind. That's why logic alone doesn't heal it. Practices like breathwork, mindfulness, gentle movement, or even something as simple as grounding exercises, touching the floor, noticing your surroundings, reminding yourself, I am safe now, can begin to reteach the body what safety feels like. And over time, this safety becomes the new baseline. Third, reframe the narrative. Instead of seeing yourself as someone permanently damaged, see yourself as someone forged in fire. Psychology research shows that the stories we tell ourselves about our past become self-fulfilling prophecies. If the story is, I am broken, you'll live broken. If the story becomes, I survived, I adapted, and now I am free to choose differently, your brain will reorganize around that. And finally, connection. Healing may begin alone, but it is completed in relationships. Studies repeatedly show that one of the strongest predictors of recovery from trauma is supportive connection. Not necessarily dozens of friends, not a perfect partner, but even one person who sees you, hears you, and accepts you can begin to rewire what once was broken. Now, I want to leave you with something that might stay with you longer than this video, something you might carry into your own reflection tonight. The punishment of childhood trauma is lifelong, but so is the responsibility. The responsibility to not hand that punishment down to the next generation. Because every time you choose to face your wounds instead of denying them, every time you pause before reacting, every time you show compassion to yourself or to someone else, you are breaking the chain. You are saying, the story stops with me. And that choice, one choice made again and again, can ripple forward for decades. But let me ask you this, because it may shift the way you see your life from this moment forward. What if your trauma wasn't just something you survived? What if it was also an invitation to live more awake, more intentional, more courageous than you ever would have if life had been easy? What if the cracks in your story are not just scars, but openings through which light enters? That doesn't erase the pain, it doesn't justify what happened, but it reframes the meaning. And meaning is what allows us to live with what cannot be undone. So when you feel the tug of that inner child, the voice asking, am I good enough? Do I matter? Pause. Don't rush past it. Answer them. Tell them what they should have been told all along. Yes, you are enough. Yes, you matter. And I will not abandon you. Because in the end, the punishment of childhood trauma is not the pain itself. It's forgetting that you still have the power to give yourself what you once needed most. And once you begin to do that, you may discover that the punishment was never the final chapter. It was only the prologue. The rest of the story is yours to write.